This week on the Brody File, a special edition of the show, we're making a house call to Dr. Ben Carson down in West Palm Beach, Florida. He wants Americans to rise up and change the direction of our nation.
People need to recognize that they do have power, but they do have to exercise it. It is our God-given duty to exercise that power.
And will he lead the way? A presidential run is in the air as God seems ready to grab him by the collar.
Has he grabbed you by the collar yet? I read an article about that.
I feel fingers.
Plus, we're talking public policy and we're talking about his deep faith.
Where is your life today without God?
It would be a very sad life, that's for sure.
Also, his wife Candy is here as she gets ready for the possible presidential plunge.
Whichever way God calls us, that's the way we're going to go. Even though it might not be our first choice, you go the way He leads because, you know, He's the one that's in charge and He knows what's best.
Get ready, everyone. Time to meet Ben Carson and his wife up close and personal. The Brody File on the air across America. Let's go. And welcome everybody to this very special edition of the Brody File. A closer look this week at Ben Carson. He has a remarkable story and he admits it is all orchestrated by God. And yes, it could all very well culminate in a run for the presidency. Our Brody File crew traveled down to his home in West Palm Beach, Florida. We got a better glimpse of what makes him tick. First up, the backstory on how he got to this point. Dr. Ben Carson is known as a straight shooter, whether it's pool or talking politics.
Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery.
His no-nonsense approach captivates conservative audiences, and now the massively organized Draft Ben Carson for President movement has positioned him near the top of presidential polls. Indeed, it looks like he might be ready to move from medicine to politics. But first, he says God would have to grab him by the collar.
And how is that conversation going with God about this potential presidential run? Has he grabbed you by the collar yet? I read an article about that.
I feel fingers.
A presidential run would only add to Carson's achievements.
My life has been truly amazing. I think about it all the time.
His well-documented journey is told in the book and movie Gifted Hands. It begins in Detroit, where he was raised by a single mom. Poor grades followed, along with a violent temper that led him to a stabbing incident with a friend. On that day, the knife miraculously hit the boy's belt buckle, giving young Ben Carson another chance to turn his life around. And he took it. Alone in his house, he picked up a Bible, gave his life to Jesus, and asked the Lord to take away his violent temper.
Never had another anger problem since that day. And some people say you just learn how to cover it up, but when the Lord fixes a problem, He fixes it. He doesn't do a paint job. So, it's virtually impossible to make me angry now.
And if the doctor becomes a presidential candidate, he says his cool demeanor is going to help him.
I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to get angry. It's just not going to happen.
This could be the essence of a Carson for President campaign. A calm doctor dispensing ideas and leading a conversation on pressing issues, seeking reconciliation.
Americans have to recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. The enemies are those people who try to divide everybody up.
For example, those calling pro-lifers anti-women or traditional marriage supporters anti-gay.
They've been reading a book by Saul Alinsky called Rules for Radicals, which says never have a conversation with your enemies because that humanizes them. And your job is to demonize them.
Candy Carson, his wife of nearly 40 years, knows that her husband will be demonized by his critics if he runs. She understands the stakes.
Our country is going a way that's different from what our founding fathers were thinking, and we wanted to make sure he felt really called to wake people up And that's what he's been doing.
The Carsons plan to lean on their Christian faith to get them through.
You know, in the Bible it says the Lord doesn't give you more than you can handle, right? And a lot of times you feel like, are you sure? Are you really sure? You know, but he does give you what you need.
We recognize that, we are being instruments in the hand of God. He is the one who really orchestrates all of this.
Right now, Carson is putting together his platform. He wants a fairer and flatter tax structure, lower corporate taxes, and health savings accounts for all. But his number one issue, the out-of-control debt.
Unless we get a grip on that, why wouldn't we suffer the same fates as other pinnacle nations who have allowed debt to encumber their progress?
Carson also will not let political correctness get in his way. He plans to speak his mind on issues like the roots of this country.
We are, in fact, a Judeo-Christian nation. And I think that's a huge part of our strength.
Or comparing our current government to Nazi Germany.
And I know you're not supposed to say Nazi Germany, but I don't care about political correctness.
He talks straight about President Obama, too.
Our president is very much like Putin, Oh, well, gee, there's no resistance here. Okay, well, I'll just keep going. And the resistance needs to be there.
What would you want to tell him?
I would want to tell him, sir, I understand that you have very defined ideals of what you think America is, but you work for the people. They don't work for you.
Constitutional authority, he has overstepped that, you believe, in many instances?
Without question. And hopefully, the legislators in Congress will understand what they need to do.
What do they need to do?
They need to have a spine. They need to stand up, because once you allow someone to take liberties with the system, they're not going to stop.
Carson says it's up to the people to change America's direction.
People need to recognize that they do have power, but they do have to exercise it. It is our God-given duty to exercise that power.
And he's praying for God to show his power in a mighty way.
Do you think this country needs a spiritual awakening?
We most definitely need a spiritual awakening. I mean, look at the direction that we're going in. Mm-hmm. Absolute absurdity.
And the good doctor seems ready to tackle that absurdity in the wild world of presidential politics. And there it is. All right, by the way, let the record reflect that I almost beat Ben Carson in pool, but look, he is good. As a matter of fact, he even trotted out that professional glove. I mean, I had no chance. When I saw the glove, I said, forget it, I'm done. You know, Dr. Carson, not only a great pool player, he's also a great man of faith. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, and when you get him going about God, well, the authenticity flows. He believes that becoming a world-famous surgeon was in God's plan for his life, and that his notoriety as a headline-making top doc paved the way for where he is today. Have a look.
If you take God out of your life, if he is, you go back to when you were a boy and that time when you recited Proverbs in that room, where is your life today without God?
It would be a very sad life, that's for sure. I would be asking myself, what is the point of life if there was no God there? And it would be a very uncertain life, because I wouldn't feel the confidence that I feel. You know, he's intervened so often in my life, and he protects you, and he guides you, and I would probably not be anywhere near as bold as I am if I didn't feel that he had my back. So I used to ask the Lord during my medical career, which I recognized was just way beyond anything ordinary. I said, Lord, why are you doing this? I said, what are you exactly setting me up for? Am I supposed to be like a great role model for kids? What is it exactly that you want me to do? And now all of that's sort of coming into focus.
How is it coming into focus?
Because I would have to have had a career like that in order to set me up to even be thinking about some of the things that people want me to do now.
All right, when we roll on here on the Brody File, Ben Carson talks taxes, immigration, the debt, and a lot more. A policy discussion with the good doctor after the break. And we are back on this special Ben Carson edition of the Brody File. So, can Ben Carson really be the Republican nominee for president? Well, look, hey, it's early, but look at some of these numbers. He's already won some straw polls in Iowa. A recent public policy poll has him as one of the top 3 candidates nationally. And he came in second at a Values Voter Summit in D.C. Now, also, don't forget that the National Draft Ben Carson for President movement has leaders in all 99 counties in Iowa just waiting for him to declare. And they've raised more money than even the Political Action Committee for Hillary Clinton. Some pretty heady stuff. But what are some of Ben Carson's ideas on the political issues of the day? Well, first of all, he's pro-life and for traditional marriage. But what else? Back to our conversation.
What's the issue that's here for you? What is the heart issue for you? There's immigration, there's Common Core, there's this education. I know that's very important. There's a lot. But if Ben Carson is going to run for president, what's the bully pulpit issue for you beyond civil discourse, which we've talked about? I know that's important.
Well, there are so many issues, but when I look at the issue that I feel has the greatest potential for the destruction of America, I go back to where I grew up, Detroit. Detroit was once the most prosperous city in America. And now it's the biggest bankruptcy in America. And you ask yourself, what happened? In a nutshell, fiscal irresponsibility and lack of caring about those who came behind. We are approaching an $18 trillion national debt. We're passing debt not only to our children, but to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and the ones after them, and basically having a profound impact on the quality of their lives. That is completely unreasonable.
What do you do? What do you do with entitlements? People would love to paint you and others as, oh, forget about the social safety net. Let's just let's cut grandma from welfare, or throw grandma from the cliff.
They do like to try to characterize it that way.
You've never thrown grandma from a cliff.
I have never done such a thing. However, in terms of entitlements, I don't think we should even talk about entitlements until we fix the economy. And I think fixing the economy is not going to be that difficult. I would reform the tax code, which is absolutely draconian. And I think you would see an explosion of our economy. And at that point, you are able to offer people very good options. And when they have very good options, that's when you really begin to talk about entitlement reform.
Reforming the tax code, corporate tax rate lower, for sure.
Much lower.
Any sort of figure, or is it hard to say at this point?
I think certainly 25% or less. And I would also want to see a proportional tax system. So, you know, as I said in the National Prayer Breakfast, you know, tithing is a system that was established by God. I don't know of anybody who's fairer than God. You know, you make $1, you pay 10 cents. You make $1 million, you pay 100,000. Why is that hard to understand? But you do have to get rid of all the loopholes.
So a fair tax, not a flat tax.
It would be fair, and it would be relatively flat. Absolutely.
I'm sure you can have a whole soliloquy about immigration, but what do you do with the folks that are here, and how do you? Is this a losing issue for Republicans if they don't figure this thing out?
I think it's a losing issue for the nation if we don't figure it out.
Okay. You don't hear about those Republicans as much as the nation, obviously.
Right. We got to do what works for our country. I do think there should be a penalty for being here illegally. And I think either you have to pay a certain penalty because you have been receiving services and there's a back pay issue, or you have to leave the country and apply for guest worker status from outside of the country. But I think also you have to remove all the incentives. What are the things that are drawing people here? You have to get rid of those things. And you have to make it illegal to hire people who are not here legally.
Employer verification system.
Absolutely.
Talking policy with Ben Carson here on the Brody File. All right, coming next, the better half. She's as sweet as her name sounds, Candy Carson. Ben's wife of nearly 40 years joins us after the break. Welcome back to our continuing house call with Dr. Ben Carson. Well, the famous saying goes like this: behind every great man, there's a great woman. And that couldn't be more true in this instance. Meet Candy Carson. She and Ben have been married for nearly 40 years. They are truly soulmates. They met at Yale, and she also came from a very poor family. She loves classical music, just like her husband. She deeply values education, just like her husband, and she loves God most of all. It really is a perfect fit. So is she ready, though, for the fireworks and insanity of a presidential run? More now with Ben and Candy Carson.
What has it been like for you, for both of you? And I'd like to get your opinion as well, Dr. Carson, about just some of the euphoria about how well he's been received. I know there are critics out there. I'm talking about the conservative community that really has seemed to pretty much embrace what he's talking about. What has your experience been like about how all of this has come together today?
Well, first off, anybody that says it's fun hasn't been there. It's grueling going from state to state. If you're in 4 and 5 states a week and you don't know where the bathroom is when you wake up. But the thing is, wherever you go, and people, when they resonate with logic and common sense, Judeo-Christian values, and not stealing from future generations, that is so reassuring, reaffirming, and you just feel like, wow, there's a chance. Because our country is going a way that's different from what our founding fathers were thinking, and we wanted to make sure he felt really called to wake people up. And that's what he's been doing.
I don't for one moment imagine that, I'm this great statesman that, is in the category of George Washington. I just recognize that, the Lord prepares us for what he wants us to do, and he provides the platform.
You think about our grandchildren. Well, maybe you don't have them, but we just got the cutest little grandbabies, and you think about their future. They should have at least the same sort of opportunities that we had. That was what our founding fathers were about. Each generation tried to make it better for the next one, not worse. And so that's why, whichever way God calls us, that's the way we're going to go. Even though it might not be our first choice, you go the way he leads, because he's the one that's in charge, and he knows what's best.
The Brody File crew is going to be praying for the Carsons if they take the plunge. We are going to be praying for wisdom, mental clarity, and stamina. All right, when we come back, Ben Carson closes his eyes and goes into three-dimensional reasoning mode. He explains this fascinating skill next. It's open mic night. And welcome back, everybody, to the Ben Carson File, or at least it feels that way this week. Time now to get a unique look at the good doctor. We know he's a gifted surgeon. His eye-hand coordination, simply remarkable. He also has something else. It's called three-dimensional reasoning skills, and boy, does it come in handy when you're a doctor. Take a look.
The best way to think about it is, if you're looking, like right now I'm looking out at this room, noticing where everything is. And then if I were to close my eyes and you were to spin me around, I would still have a very good impression of where everything was in relationship to everything else. And that's a very important quality to have when you're dealing with something like the brain, which is largely a nebulous blob.
I'll tell you what, that is simply amazing, because when I close my eyes, that's it. I'm out for the night, not Dr. Carson. But the three-dimensional reasoning that he has is not something that he's necessarily proud of. The one thing that both Candy and Ben Carson are proud of is their Carson's Scholars Fund. It is a great program. They are basically awarding academic excellence by giving out scholarships and trophies to top educational achievers, and they fund reading rooms as well in so many schools around the country. And this is where children learn to really love reading in a warm, relaxed atmosphere. And for the Carsons, it's a passion.
Helping the kids to understand that the person that has the most to do with what happens to you is you. It really resonates, and they get so excited about the books and the learning. And we started in the 4th grade, before kids have taken that irrevocable path down the wrong way. Because if we can get kids to start thinking about their future early on, then there's less chance of them dropping out. You know, the dropout rate nationally is between 20 and 30% of those who enter high school. And these 80% of them are functionally illiterate and they can't fill out a job application. So they become a drain on society. So that's why we tried to set up these role models.
The key thing is that we realize that education is the great divide in this country. It doesn't matter what else is going on in your life. If you get a good education, you have an excellent opportunity of being able to control the events in your life and not being a victim.
All right, we're back in a moment with some final Brody File thoughts and observations about the good doctor. It's open mic night. And we're back with some final thoughts and observations about Ben Carson, and of course, we like to call it our Brody File commentary. Well, look, where do we start with Ben Carson? Well, how about this? He's just a plain nice guy. Now, does that mean he can be president? Well, of course not. As a matter of fact, he may be too nice to be president. But look, the Brody File experience down in West Palm Beach was as follows. What you see is what you get. He oozes authenticity, he's not afraid to be himself, and that is a stellar quality in a human being, let alone someone who might run for president. But what about his chances if he does run? Well, look, he has a shot. The political prognosticators are going to poo-poo his chances, but don't discount this man. He has an uplifting message. He's not a politician, and those are two good attributes right there. He's also going to be well organized, possibly well funded. Two more feathers in his cap. The downside, well, it really is the same as the upside in that he is not a politician. You see, he's going to have to learn to navigate the shark-infested waters of politics. It's just a reality. From what he says, how he says it, when he says it, and to whom, he'll have to figure all of this out on the fly. He's a smart guy. Actually, a really smart guy, so he can figure it out. But remember, politics is different than medicine. For decades, he was saving lives. They, in politics, want to destroy lives. But the Brody File senses that Ben Carson is going to be just fine. He's a survivor. He's seen it all. And we now wait to see if America is ready to buy in to Dr. Carson's prescription for this country. All right, that does it. Until next time, everybody, God bless. Have a great week.